Hello, everyone, and namaskar. So, today's podcast is a continuation of the reading of the book titled Anandamurti, the Jamalpur Years. And this is a reading of the 27th chapter titled A Monastic Order Begins. A sadhaka who views everything with equanimity, be it one's own home or the burial ground, gold or grass, one's own children or one's enemies, fire or water, one's own property or another's property, lives in the world as an avaduta, as if he or she were the second manifestation of Shiva. One day in the early spring of 1961, Baba asked Sushil Dar, his customary lunch hour stenographer, to bring a candle, a glass, some paper, and a pen to the tiger's grave that evening. He would be giving some dictation. When they arrived at the grave, Sushil put the glass over the candle, thus creating a small makeshift lantern. Baba gathered the Margis around him and began explaining that a spiritual philosophy needed one book to serve as its fundamental text. Up until that point, idea and ideology had been serving that purpose. But now he intended to begin dictating the definitive text of Anandamarga philosophy. It would be in the form of sutras or aphorisms, thus resuscitating the traditional form of Sanskrit philosophical discourse that had been in vogue for more than 5 millennia, but which had been gradually dying out. The title of the new work, he said, would be Ananda Sutram. Baba closed his eyes and chanted the first sutra. Shiva Shatyatmakam Brahma, while pointing to the sky and tracing slow circles with his fingers. Then he added a commentary in Bengali, which Sushil noted down. The first sutra was a definition of God, or Supreme Consciousness, as a composite of Shiva and Shakti, the witnessing consciousness, and its operative principle, or energy. It was the opening to the first chapter, which dealt with Brahmachakra, the cycle of creation. After explaining that consciousness and its creative force or energy cannot be separated from each other, like the two sides of a piece of paper, he explained that there could be no substantiation of existence without the presence of the witnessing consciousness, thus making it the starting point of any philosophical inquiry. The physical sense of the body is telepathized on the mental plate. In other words, the physical sense is awakened in the mental plate due to the reflection that follows the impact of the crude physical waves on the mental plate. Similarly, the sense of every crude object is awakened in the mental plate as soon as the reflection takes place following the impact of the waves of the object on the mental plate. Identical waves hit the soul entity, causing the reflection of those mental waves. And this awakens in the unit a sense of its indivisibility from the soul. All mundane objects, crude, subtle, or causal, consist of mental waves or thought waves. And so, in the fullest accord with reasoning and logic, we may call the soul omnitelepathic. It is because of this omnitelepathic Atman that the existence of all mundane objects, visible or invisible, large or small, finds its factual substantiation and recognition. After defining Shakti as the creative force of Shiva in a second sutra and explaining the relationship between the two in his commentary, as well as differentiating between the instrumental, material, and efficient causes of creation, Baba gave a third sutra in which he asserted that the proof of the existence of God was to be found in sanchara and pratisanchara, the introversive and extroversive phases of creation. In the short commentary that followed, he stated, "The existence of any entity is known by the process of its activity. Thought or witnesship, of which witnesship belongs to Purusha, and the other two substantive factors primarily belong to Prakriti. And so the fact of Prakriti being the causal entity of the stream of action and thought will be recognized only when she completely identifies herself with the objectivity. This appropriation of objectivity by Prakriti depends on her ever-increasing sanchara or decreasing pratisanchara influence on Purusha. Prakriti's manifestation lies in these extrovertive sanchara and introverted pratisanchara processes." In the conversation that followed, Baba explained that a cause can be known by its effect. Just as a scientist is able to substantiate the existence of the electron by measuring its effect, the traces it leaves of its presence, the spiritually aware mind is able to intuit the existence of Shiva and Shakti by the traces they leave in the form of the endless cycle of creation. One Margi asked if the short explanation he dictated would be sufficient. "It will be sufficient for Margis and Acharyas," he replied. "You will have to give a more detailed explanation for the general public in a language they can understand. The detailed explanation is in Subhasita Samgraha. But for many people, the language there is too difficult. Nevertheless, the interpretation I have given will be enough to avoid others giving radically different interpretations in the future, as has happened with the Gita of Krishna and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali." Baba then corrected the spelling of the Sanskrit words, and the night's work was finished. Over the next several months, Baba gave 2 or 3 sutras per night, several nights a week, always at the tiger's grave. The first 25 sutras were dedicated to the cycle of creation. They began with the involution of consciousness into matter and concluded with the evolution of consciousness out of matter, a process that reaches its culmination when the human being attains spiritual illumination, thus completing the cycle of creation. In the second chapter, he explained the spiritual nature of the living being and its relationship with the cosmic entity. He also refuted 2 religious beliefs from opposite ends of the globe, declaring in one sutra that there is no such thing as heaven or hell, and in the other that Brahma is truth and the world is relative truth, a refutation of Shankaracharya's assertion that God is truth and the world is false or illusion. In the third chapter, he dealt with the unit mind, samskara, death, and transmigration, and the path to liberation. He ended the chapter with a sutra citing prayer and ritualistic worship as sources of confusion rather than spiritual practices, and another defining devotion as ideation on God, rather than any kind of external worship or praise. The fourth chapter dealt with the origin of creation. In the 16 sutras of the fifth chapter, he elucidated the fundamental principles of his social philosophy, Prout. He ended the book with an epigraph: Pragatishila, Upayoga, Tattwamidam, Sarvajana Hitartam, Sarvajana Sukartam, Pracharitam. This is the progressive utilization theory, propagated for the welfare and happiness of all. On June 28, Baba dictated the last of the 94 sutras. The 5 chapters of Ananda Sutram were complete. On the previous day, he had begun giving a week-long series of Prout classes as part of the second annual Proutist Conference, later compiled as the Observer's Diary. In these classes, he used the sutras from the 5th chapter as a point of departure before launching into detailed discussions on a variety of topics, from land reform to the cultivation of a world language. From then on, Ananda Sutram will become the main text for the training of acharyas and volunteers. As in ancient times, candidates will be required to memorize the sutras and to be able to give a thorough exposition of each of them. Though Baba would be the author of over 200 books by the end of his life, Ananda Sutram will be the crowning achievement of his philosophic and literary work, the foundation stone of his teachings. Early the previous year, Baba called Nityananda aside one day and told him that he wanted to give him an independent responsibility for Prachar. You see, he said, the General Secretary is not able to concentrate so much on Prachar. He has severe time constraints. If things continue as they are, it will take hundreds of years for the ideology to spread throughout the world. I want you to start building up an independent structure. Concentrate on the young people and the students. Start your work from today, and my blessings will be with you. Later that evening, Nityananda accompanied Baba to the tiger's grave, where a group of Margis were waiting. As they were passing the church, Baba stopped and said, "If I die today, how many people will have come to know our ideology?" Recognizing the import of Baba's words, Nityananda reaffirmed his promise to take responsibility for spreading the ideology as quickly and as widely as possible. He began his work by organizing VSS camps at regular intervals. He designed a course in Anandamarga spiritual and social philosophy based on idea and ideology, and used it to train the participants in the philosophy, strengthen their spiritual practices, and instill in them a zeal for prachar and social service. As Baba advised, he concentrated on the youth and the students. In each camp, he kept his eye out for promising young men who could help him with his work. Soon the number of initiates started increasing rapidly, the majority of them college-age students. The addition of Prout training to the camps helped stoke the fervent idealism that the younger initiates brought with them. The independent structure that Baba had asked for gradually began to take shape. In fact, the work progressed so quickly that after a few months, Nityananda petitioned Baba to allow him to renounce his job at the railway workshop and dedicate himself full-time to the organization. The time has not yet come for you to leave your service, Baba told him. I will let you know when that time comes. Instead, he started taking long leaves of absence, using that time to travel to different parts of India to conduct camps. As the number of initiates continued to mount, so did the signs of opposition. After Visheshwar completed his Acharya training, Pranay warned him that he would encounter severe opposition in his area when he began to propagate Anandamarga there. The prediction was an accurate one. The leading capitalists, alarmed by the ideals of Prout, hired a group of thugs to drive Anandamarga out of town, and one young Margi was killed in the attack. The Margis lodged the case and refused to leave. In May 1961 DMC in Munger, Baba held a meeting for Kapaliks and talked to them about the types of opposition they could expect to face in the future. He warned them that the time was not far off when the government would become their principal opposition. If a time comes that you find yourself in prison, he told them, you should know how to perform your Kapalik sadhana under those conditions. Then he taught them the process for performing Kapalik sadhana in jail. Afterward, some of the senior acharyas got together to discuss the unusual nature of those instructions. They agreed that when Baba said if, he really meant when. After the DMC, an All India VSS camp was held in Hasipur. Hundreds of volunteers attended, a clear indication to all of how rapidly the organization was growing. In the meantime, Nityananda had purchased a motorcycle and 2 jeeps for his fledgling organization. One of the young men who came to Jamalpur for training was Ram Tanuk, a lawyer from Begusarai, who had recently married Ram Kilavan's daughter, Ahalya Devi. He and another volunteer, Lalan, took the jeeps out for driving practice to the ring road outside of town. Meanwhile, Baba was sitting on his cot in the Jagrati, talking to Haragobin Mandal and Vivekananda Singh. Suddenly, in the middle of their conversation, Baba let out a grunt and some words that sounded to them like, "Be safe." When they asked him what had happened, he told them that there had just been an accident. Within half an hour, they got the news that Ram Tanuk had crashed his jeep into a tree and was now in the hospital in a coma. An old woman had attempted to cross the ring road without looking. In an effort to avoid her, Ram Tanuk had lost control of his vehicle. Lalan, who had been following behind him in the other jeep, rushed him to the nearby hospital, where the doctors informed him that it would be touch and go whether or not Ram Tanuk survived. Baba was about to give an Acharya class when he got the news. He called Ramakanta aside and gave him instructions to go to the hospital and remain in Ram Tanuk's room round the clock and to send back regular reports of his condition. Nityananda accompanied him and did his best to console Ram Kilavan and his family, who beseeched him to bring Baba there. Nityananda conveyed their request to Baba, and Baba sent him back with a message that if Ram Tanuk did not recover consciousness within 72 hours, then he would go himself. On the third afternoon, Ramakanta was alone with Ram Tanuk when the doctor made his rounds and examined the patient. When he completed his examination, he informed Ramakanta that an accumulation of blood in the patient's brain had formed a large hematoma. If it were not drained within the next few hours, the patient will likely die. Unfortunately, they did not have the requisite facilities for such a procedure in that small Jamalpur hospital. He would have to be rushed to Patna. The doctor told him to inform the family so they can make immediate arrangements to move the patient. Ramakanta became frightened. He was unsure what to do. So he ran as fast as he could to Baba's office, about 10 minutes from the hospital. Baba listened quietly to the news and then told him to return to his vigil. "Whatever you do," he said, "don't allow them to move the patient. I will be there shortly." Baba sent for Nityananda, and together they walked over to the hospital. By that time, Ram Kilovan and the rest of Ram Tanuk's relatives had arrived. As soon as they saw Baba, they fell at his feet, crying and begging him to save Ram Tanuk's life. Baba walked over to the patient's bedside, touched him on the forehead, and said in a gentle voice, "Ram Tanuk, I have come." Ram Tanuk's eyelids fluttered open, and a sigh escaped his lips. He looked at Baba, then he lifted his hands and said, "Baba, what happened to me?" Baba clasped the patient's hands and smiled. "Rest now. Everything will be fine." When he closed his eyes again, Baba told his relatives that there was nothing to worry about, but they should not allow the doctors to move him, nor should they talk to him until he was fully recovered. Baba embraced Ram Tanuk, then got up and left. A short while later, the doctor came back. Seeing that the patient was still there, he began shouting angrily, demanding to know why they had not moved him. Ramakanta, following Baba's instructions, explained to him that the only place they could have taken him would have been Patna, nearly 5 hours' journey. He would have died before they reached there. Better for him to die here, he told the doctor, in the presence of his family. The doctor thought about it for a moment and then calmed down. He began examining the patient. After a couple minutes, he called for a nurse and asked her to begin removing the bandages. Startled to see no sign of the hematoma and obvious improvement in his vital signs. As they were removing the bandages, Ram Tanuk opened his eyes again and began moving his hands and feet. The doctor told the family it was a miracle. If they wanted, they can give him a little soup in the evening. The next day he allowed him solid food, and a day later, he released him from the hospital. Not long afterward, Ram Tanuk would take on the role of legal secretary for the organization, a post he would hold for the rest of his professional life. For the Durga Puja holidays in mid-October, Baba scheduled a DMC tour to various cities in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Nityananda had been planning to take a holiday of his own, far from his organizational duties. For a long time, he had been feeling a strong urge to spend some time in the Himalayas, meditating in the mountain solitude and living the life of a solitary sannyasi, if only for a few days. He had not told Baba about it. However, suspecting that Baba might disapprove, his fears were soon confirmed. A day before the holidays began, he went to Baba's office during the lunch hour and found Baba in a grave mood. "How are you planning to spend your holidays?" Baba asked. Nityananda squirmed in his chair. "Baba, I was thinking to go to Rishikesh to meditate." "I see," Baba said quietly. You are thinking about your own liberation without paying any heed to the distress and downtrodden people. How selfish. Tears welled in the corners of Nityananda's eyes. He grabbed a piece of paper and placed it in front of Baba. Baba, kindly write out my tour program for me. Baba took his pen and wrote out a program that began with the Lucknow DMC and included Prachar visits to Allahabad, Raipur, Tata, and Calcutta before returning to Jamalpur. Nityananda followed the program that Baba had written out. He did Prachar in each of those cities. But he still hoped that he might be able to visit Rishikesh for a day before proceeding from Lucknow to Allahabad. On that day, however, he came down with a fever, and his wish for some taste of the sannyasi's life went unfulfilled. On October 30, a few days after they returned from the holidays, Nityananda paid Baba a visit during the lunch hour. They were discussing spiritual matters when Baba said, "I am thinking of creating avadutas. If you find anybody suitable, let me know." "Baba, what is an avaduta?" "An avaduta will have to follow certain rules and regulations. In the future, they will lead the organization." "What kind of rules?" Baba picked up a piece of paper from his desk and passed it to Nityananda. "Note down." He dictated more than 40 rules of conduct. As he was noting down the rules, it suddenly dawned on Nityananda that Baba was talking about making an order of monks. This provoked an immediate reaction. "But Baba, I always thought that you were against the idea of monastic orders. You told us about the problems Buddhism had due to the creation of their monastic order. And now you want to create an order of your own. Were you just deceiving us when you said these things? Were you planning all along to create an order of renunciate disciples?" "It is not like that," Baba said. "You see, the organization is beginning to grow very fast now. It won't be possible for family people to do the necessary work that will be required. I need some people who can dedicate themselves full time. That's all. Now, if you find a suitable person who is ready to take Avaduta initiation, you should forward his name to me. That person should be unmarried, since this will be an order of celibate monks. But if he is married, it may still be possible. In that case, he'll have to get permission from his wife and make arrangements for her financial security." The next day, Nityananda brought the list of rules to Baba at lunchtime. "Baba, some of these rules are only suitable for monks who live in the forest or in seclusion. They are not for monks who will be serving the society or taking an active part in social construction, as you are proposing." "Which rules are those?" Nityananda made his case against several of the rules that Baba had included. Baba nodded and said, "Okay, then strike them off the list." Nityananda gathered his courage. "Baba, if you're going to go ahead with this plan of yours, then I want to be the first Avaduta." Baba smiled. "Okay, if that is your wish. But first, you will have to get permission from your wife." All through the month of November, Nityananda struggled with his emotions. He had long dreamed about renouncing the world and leading the life of an ascetic. However, the sannyasi order that Baba envisioned was not the life of sole dedication to spiritual practices that he had associated with the traditional Indian monk. While the Anandamarga monks, by rule, would be required to perform the spiritual practices 4 times a day, the rest of their time will be dedicated to the missionary work of the organization. He had seen the list of rules, and he knew it would not be easy for him. In the last week of November, he took leave from the office and went to his native village of Amra to talk to his wife about his desire to become a sannyasi. To his great surprise, she gave him permission without any hesitation. If he wanted to dedicate himself to the great cause of Baba's work, she said, he had her full support. His parents and other relatives were less accommodating, but after a few days, they also acquiesced. He made arrangements for his wife to remain in his father's house, to raise their young child, and named her as the legal heir to his family inheritance. The morning of his departure for Jamalpur, the entire village came to see him off. The village elders garlanded him and gave him their blessings. Last of all, his father. On December 10, he informed Baba that he had begun following the Avaduta rules. Thus began a 1-year trial. If he were able to follow the rules to Baba's satisfaction, he would then become eligible for Avaduta initiation. When news leaked out of Baba's plan to create a monastic order, with Nityananda as the first candidate, it brought mixed reactions. Pranay, especially, did not like the idea. He tried to dissuade Nityananda from his decision, but the die was cast. 2 weeks later, Nityananda accompanied Baba from Raipur to Tatanagar, and then made preparations to catch the evening train to Jamalpur en route to Ranchi for a week-long VSS camp. As was his custom, he entered Baba's room to do Sastang Pranam and get the master's permission to leave. As he was leaving the room, Baba called him back. The master was lying on his bed, and Nityananda sat on the floor in front of him, expecting to receive some last-minute instruction or advice. But to his surprise, Baba didn't say anything. He just gazed at him in silence, his eyes seemingly filled with compassion. Nearly half an hour passed in this way. Though it was time for Baba's puja, and Nityananda's train was due to leave, he did not dare interrupt Baba's mood, which was unlike any he had ever seen. From time to time he glanced at his watch, aware that if he didn't leave soon, he might miss his train. But mostly he remained absorbed in Baba's gaze, wondering what was in the master's mind. Finally, after another 15 minutes, he prostrated again and told Baba that he had to leave now. Otherwise, he would miss his train. Baba returned his namaskar in silence, looking at him with the same unfathomable gaze. Nityananda hurried to the car, which was waiting to take him to the station. He managed to catch the train just as it was leaving, and once he found his berth, he lay down, thinking for a long time about the look in Baba's eyes and his mysterious silence, until he finally fell asleep. He reached Jamalpur early in the morning and went to the Jagrati, where a group of 15 volunteers was waiting for him. They left a couple hours later for Ranchi, 16 people in 2 jeeps, with Nityananda at the wheel of the lead jeep. They stopped in Hazaribagh in the early afternoon to eat lunch, and from there they entered a hilly terrain filled with blind curbs. As they rounded a particularly sharp curb, the brakes seized up on Nityananda, causing the jeep to flip over. The other passengers were thrown free, but Nityananda's forearm was caught in the vehicle, and he was dragged along the ground with his face to the pavement. While he was being dragged, he saw Baba standing in the road up ahead, with his hand raised, palm upward, in Abhaya Mudra, the mudra of fearlessness. The moving jeep came to a halt at Baba's feet, and at that moment, Nityananda lost consciousness. When he awoke the next morning, he was lying in a bed in Hazaribagh Sadar Hospital. His first thought was of Baba's room in Tatanagar, of Baba lying on the bed and looking at him with that unfathomable gaze. He understood immediately that Baba's mood had been an indication of the accident that would soon befall him. The infinite sympathy of his divine Guru, knowing the suffering that awaited his disciple. He had no doubt in that moment that Baba had saved his life. The ulna bone in Nityananda's forearm was broken, and his face was so badly disfigured that he could not recognize himself in a mirror. Nevertheless, he continued on to Ranchi later that day, and he joined the camp on the 5th day, assuming his regular duties as camp in charge, with his arm in a sling and his face wrapped in bandages. When he returned to Jamalpur a few days later, Baba was in his room in the Jagrati, sitting with the devotees. The moment the master saw him, he said, "Nityananda, I think now you have realized that wherever you go, an invisible power goes with you, and if needed, he appears in physical form. During the accident, you might have seen him, is it not?" Hearing this, tears began to flow from Nityananda's eyes. That winter, a renowned astrologer from Muzaffarpur initiated a scare throughout India by publishing the news that a planetary conjunction of 8 planets, forecast for February 3 to 5, 1962, would engender a disaster of biblical proportions, hailed afterward by the Indian media as the end of the world. The news began dominating the headlines. Tales of panic became commonplace. A sacrificial fire on a scale never seen before was prepared in Deoghar to ward off the evil effects of the conjunction. Similar rituals were performed all over India, prompting Baba to say that instead of wasting so much ghee in the sacrificial fires, they should give it to the poor. In the meantime, a month-long training session began in Jamalpur. Dasarath and Nityananda taught most of the classes, often in Baba's presence. One day, one of the trainees was taking a bath at the well when his watch was stolen from the pocket of his pants, which he had left hanging on a wall. It was the first time anything like that had happened at the Jagrati. He reported it to the ashram manager, who in turn reported the matter to Baba. "What can I do?" Baba said. "You should inform the police." The idea of notifying the police, however, was repugnant to them. Seeing Baba's indifference to the matter, there was little more they can do. That evening, Dasarath gave a class in the Jagrati courtyard. Baba sat beside him, interrupting from time to time to explain certain points. Suddenly, Baba asked a heavy-set young man to stand up. "What do you have in your left pocket?" he asked. The young man kept quiet. Baba called him over, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a watch. He held it up so everyone could see. "Is this the watch that was stolen?" Baba handed it back to its owner and turned his gaze once again on the thief. "Is this the first watch you have stolen?" Again, the young man didn't reply. "It is not. In fact, It is the ninth watch you have stolen. Up until now, you have been able to escape the consequences, but no more. If you steal one more time, I promise you, you will be caught by the police. After the frightened young man sat down, Astana asked Baba a question about the planetary alignment. Baba got up and went to the chalkboard, where he began drawing the zodiac, followed by a series of complicated mathematical formulas. With the aid of the diagrams and the equations, he explained how it would not be possible for these 8 planets to come into an exact line. Had they done so, he said, it would have had an adverse effect on this Earth, but this will not happen. Then he asked the Margis to print a leaflet on the subject and distribute it throughout Bihar. The text of the leaflet was subsequently printed in various regional newspapers. This helped to some extent to allay the fears of the general public. When the alignment passed without incident, the Anandamarga office received words of thanks from different sectors for helping to calm the apprehensions of the public. National elections in India took place in February of that year. Throughout the winter, the proudest had been busy preparing to contest seats in Jamalpur and nearby areas. Lalan, a young intellectual and future professor who was serving as the chief secretary of the Universal Proudest Students Federation, proclaimed to the young Margis in his seminars that these elections would be a historic landmark in the history of Prout. He predicted that within 10 years, the Indian government would be in the hands of a Proudist party. Nityananda took offense at these words, which he considered unrealistic and irresponsible propaganda. But he could do nothing to dissuade Lalan from inflaming the hopes of the young volunteers. The proudest candidates were routed in the elections. Some only received the votes of their fellow disciples and their families. Discouraged by this setback, many of the proud volunteers left Jamalpur for their homes at the end of a winter of hard work and frustrated hopes. One morning, a few days after the election, Baba arrived at the Jagrati shortly after 8. Nityananda was staying there by himself at the time, still recuperating from his accident. Baba asked him about the present condition of the organization he was building up, and Nityananda took the opportunity to express his frustration. Many of the volunteers who had been helping him had gone back to their homes after the elections. Moreover, he was dissatisfied with the amount of cooperation he was getting from the General Secretary. Then what do you propose to do about it? Baba asked. Nityananda's answer was to create a corps of whole-time workers, supported by organizational funds. He could then post these workers in different areas of the country to do full-time prachar. Preferably, they would be young, single Margis who did not have a family to support. He asked permission to do a tour of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh for the purpose of recruiting workers. Do whatever you think is needed for the welfare of the mission, Baba told him. No need to consult me. Work fearlessly, and the invisible power of the Lord will be with you. The following week, Nityananda left on a long tour of northern India. Soon scores of young Margis volunteered to work full-time for the organization. Once they completed their training and became acharyas, he began dispatching them to different parts of India with the help of donations from the householder disciples, mostly to places where Anandamarga had not yet reached. The new old-timers, as they were called, were instructed to stay in the inexpensive railway retiring homes at night and to spend their days doing prachar in whichever city they were posted. At the beginning of each month, Nityananda will send them their monthly allowance, care of the local postmaster. This allowance did not always prove sufficient. Ramaswarath and Ramesh Kumar were sent to South India. Once, they were doing prachar in the state of Kerala when their money ran out. They decided to buy lemons with their last 2 rupees and fast on lemon water until the new month arrived, and they could expect their monthly allowance. Meanwhile, in Jamalpur, Baba suddenly stopped eating. He would not disclose the reason to Pranay or any other household or disciple. When Nityananda asked him about the matter, however, he told him, Ramaswarath and Ramesh Kumar are fasting because their money has run out. How can I eat when my children are suffering? Do you think you can send them some money by telegraphic money order? It was only after Baba got word that the 2 young men had received the money and eaten that he broke his own fast. Asim was assigned to the nearby areas of Bihar. A prominent Margi from Ranchi took responsibility for paying for his bus tickets. In an interview, Asim described what it was like for him to be a young whole-time worker. For meditation, you would talk with your acharya. For work, you had to talk to Nityananda. Baba would only talk to you about your personal affairs. It was father and son. If you had any complaint about work, you'll tell him. He would tell the in-charge and solve it. So you got a father who supported you, loved you, favored you, inspired you, took care of you. The acharya showed you your defects in meditation. Nityananda showed you the defects in your work. But Baba just took you on his lap. We were crazy to meet him. It was the same as going to Braj and seeing Krishna. Always charming, loving, happy, full of flow. You are in a trance. You have no thought, no problem. You wait for Baba to come and go running to his room. He had a choki, a hard bed with a blanket. There was no cushion on his choki. Sometimes I have seen a pillow, sometimes not. There was no carpet on the floor where we sat. The ashram gate would be open. The cows would enter. There were a few flowers, a small well where we took bath, a toilet in the back. No comfort, no kitchen, no phone. There was a light, but no fan. We fanned Baba by hand. Baba never paid any attention to external decorum or comfort. He only cared about preparing us one by one, like you make a doll by hand. The external surroundings were immaterial. When Baba came to the Jagrati, he would wear slippers. Many times you would see that the slipper was finished. The sole would be worn through so that his heel touched the ground. Many times he would be working in the garden and you would see a hole in his t-shirt. That was the beginning of the marga. I was sent to do prachar in the surrounding areas. Go in the morning, come back in the evening, and have his darshan. A charming life. You don't get any food. You have to arrange that yourself. You have to sleep on your blanket. All you get there is a place to lie down and water to drink. But we didn't care. All we cared about was the chance to be near him. Then he made it in 3 days. I was only supposed to come back to Jamalpur after 3 days in the field. But I couldn't stand to go 3 days without seeing him. When Nityananda saw me, he said, "You know, when Baba becomes angry with somebody, he does not talk with him. You came back before the 3 days were up. Baba won't like that." I didn't care. I wanted to see him. But when Baba came to the Jagrati, I saw that he was right. Baba wouldn't talk to me. So again I left to go do my work. A day or two later, Baba's train passed through the place where I was working. Everybody went to the platform to see him. I went also, but I stayed in the back because Baba was unhappy with me. Why should I go in front and displease him? He started asking about people. Where is this person? Where is that person? Then I heard, "Oh, there you are. I was looking for you." Just to make me happy, you see. Then he left. When I came back to Jamalpur, I thought that since Baba was unhappy with me, I wouldn't eat. I'd just fast. Why should I live if he doesn't talk to me? That day, Baba came to the Jagrati from the office about 12:30. It was his lunch hour. But instead of taking lunch, he came to the Jagrati. I was alone there at the time. When I saw Baba coming, I went and hid in the room. Baba came and found me. He said, "How are you? I came to talk to you. But first, you go and eat. I will wait for you." He waited in his room while I ran across the street. There was a Margi there who had a small cafe. He used to charge half a rupee for a meal. I broke my fast and ran back. Baba started talking about this and that, as if nothing had happened. He had come just to make me eat. The relationship was that deep. It was that close. Once I went to give a talk in Bariapur, a town near Jamalpur, maybe 45 minutes journey. It was at the end of 1962, and I was maybe 23 then. There was about 35 or 40 people in the room, and nearly all were aged. I gave a talk on meditation and universal fraternity. They started quoting from the scriptures in support of the top knot and sacred thread and caste and creed. I replied as much as possible on scientific grounds, but they really had me cornered. They knew so many Sanskrit verses, one after the other, and I was only talking science and rationality. At the end, one boy stood up. He knew them. He knew their character. He said, "You people do this and that nonsense in your personal life, and yet you are talking in this way. Don't you see the glowing face of this young man? And such nice answers he gives? So scientific and rational." He really rebuked them. They became ashamed and left. Afterward, 4 or 5 people stayed and learned meditation. They gave me food and brought me to the train station and bought my ticket back. So I got food and my ticket, and some people learned meditation. I did my job. But I didn't come back happy. I came back disturbed. When I entered the Jagrati, Baba was just finishing his evening talk. I met him between the gate and the room. The first thing I said to Baba was, "Until I get realization, I will not be able to go out for prachar." Baba said, "But did it not so happen that a young boy helped you in the meeting?" "But Baba," I said, "I could not answer their questions. I embarrassed you in the field." "Tell them as much as you know," he said. "When you pass high school, you can teach children. When you pass university, you can teach high school." Then I said, "But Baba, I need to meditate and realize first before I can represent you." And he said, "By the time you meditate and realize, many will die. Will you teach the ghosts?" He is the master, but you see the patience, talking to me as if I were his equal, his friend. Then I said, Baba, I have so many weaknesses. How can I teach people unless I go and develop myself? You are much better than the common mass, he said. Do your work, and you will be able to help. You know, what you can get in a whole life's meditation, I can give you in 5 minutes. I have come here to establish a mission. I need some medium to implement it. Do the work, and you will see that everything is set right. As if you were just a medium, being used to implement it. Go and do, and you will see. It will be possible. Remember one thing, costly things are not available cheap. If you give a very valuable thing to somebody at a cheap price, they will fail to respect it. And if you give a very costly thing to someone who does not deserve it, they will fail to maintain it. Now, tell me what I said. I repeated what Baba said. Okay, remember this. Your duty is to do what I ask you to do. It is my headache to solve your problem. Are you ready? Yes, Baba. You know, a day will come when just by looking, you will know the nature, the mind, and the condition of a person. I thought that he was just trying to inspire me, to lift my spirits. But today I see that everything he said that day has come true. Almost overnight, the new whole-timer system changed the character of the organization. Many of the young men who came forward had already been looking for a cause they could dedicate themselves to. Others saw the enthusiasm and fire of their comrades and found it contagious. Some were simply enamored with Baba and were ready to do anything to please him. When Master Diren first saw Baba in Barakpur early that year, he watched in amazement as Baba scolded his friends for faults no one could have known about. One boy had slept late and missed his Wednesday morning meditation. Another had missed his Monday evening meditation because he had been chatting with friends. A third was guilty of smoking bidi cigarettes in secret and became red in the face when Baba pulled a pack from his pocket. Master Diren had been looking for a great guru with whom he could take shelter, and that was all he needed to see. When he went to Jamalpur a few weeks later, he met Baba at the gate of the Jagrati and told him that he had come to stay forever. Baba smiled and told him to attend the Proud Camp, then taking place in Bhagalpur, and then come back to Jamalpur for training. Another college student, Bishwabandhu, had his PC in December 1961 DMC at Raipur. During his PC, Baba related to him 3 incidents from his childhood when he had almost died. The first was when he had fallen from a tree and lost consciousness. He had felt an invisible energy revive him and thrust him back into the world of the living. Baba described the incident in detail to the astonished young man and told him that he had actually died and had been saved by a divine power. The second time was when he was about to be hit by a train and had felt the force throw him out of the way. The third time, he had gotten stuck in some railway tracks and had again felt an invisible force free him. After recounting these 3 incidents, Baba said, "So you see, this life is not yours, it is mine." Bishwabandhu started crying and embraced Baba. "You have great work to do for humanity," Baba said. "When the right time comes, I will call for you." With the creation of the whole timer system, he would also come to Jamalpur ready to volunteer. Though Pranay was uneasy about Baba's decision to make an order of sannyasis, he felt a deep affinity with the life of a renunciate and tried to follow that ideal in his personal life. Baba had, in fact, given him the name Sadananda several years earlier. Though Pranay was instructed not to use the name in public, he was proud of it and considered himself Baba's first and only Avaduta. Then, while his concern continued to mount over the prospect of Nityananda becoming an Avaduta and adopting the orange robes of a sannyasi, Baba gave him an order that shocked him and sent the course of his life in an unforeseen direction. On April 14, a vivacious young woman from the Hooghly district of West Bengal named Pratima Roy arrived in Jamalpur to visit her sister Nilima and take part in a dance recital scheduled for the 16th. Her father, a film director and writer who had trained her in dance and music since her early childhood, accompanied her. On her arrival, she went to the house of Amar Sen, a friend of her sister and brother-in-law, for the first rehearsal. While she was there, she was introduced to her host and his friend Pravat Sarkar, who had dropped by to visit Amar and watch the rehearsal. All she remembered about Baba from that first glimpse was that he passed the time with his friend, telling humorous stories and laughing. After the rehearsal, she returned to her sister's house. Shortly thereafter, a messenger arrived at the door bearing a message for her father. Though it was already late in the evening, her father left the house as soon as he read the note, taking her brother-in-law with him. Though nothing would be communicated to her, the content of the message was an invitation to discuss a marriage proposal for his daughter. The proposal originated from one Pravat Sarkar through the offices of that friend of the family, Amar Sen. The name of the prospective groom was Pranay Kumar Chatterjee, a good friend of Pratima's brother-in-law. For reasons Pratima could never discover or quite understand, her father agreed to the proposal after a short talk with Baba. He did not even take the time to consult with his wife or his mother, as one might have expected. Neither of them had made the trip. The next day, after the morning's rehearsal, Pranay's mother dropped by to see the girl that her guru had selected for her son to marry. She sat and talked with Pratima as if she had dropped by for a simple visit, never once mentioning the subject of marriage. She was impressed with what she saw. That evening, while Pratima and her sister were at the cinema, she returned and finalized the negotiations with Pratima's father. Afterward, they informed Baba that the negotiations had been successfully concluded. He, in turn, sent a message to Pranay through Sukumar that the time had come for his disciple to get married. Pranay was shocked when he got the news. Disbelief soon turned to anger, but he realized there was nothing he could do. He could not and would not go against his guru's orders. At Sukumar's insistence, he went to Pratima's sister's house and met with her father. Pranay agreed to the proposal, but he put one condition. The marriage would have to be celebrated within 24 hours. Otherwise, the marriage was off. I felt that no sensible person could agree to such a condition, Pranay later said, and thus the marriage will be dismissed, and I will not be violating Guru Deva's order. Much to Pranay's dismay, however, Pratima's father agreed to his condition. When Pratima and her sister arrived home, her father requested her to sing a couple of bhajans for his guests. Pranay listened with his eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were red, as if he were drunk. An odd detail that Pratima found exceedingly strange. When the guests had left, her father gave her some Anandamarga books to read, in which he had marked specific passages. She found them interesting, but she still had no idea what fate held in store for her. The next morning, a rickshaw rode through the nearby streets with a drummer and a boy who was passing out leaflets. The leaflets announced that there would be a marriage that evening in the Anandamarga Jagrati. Everyone in the neighborhood was invited, Margis and non-Margis alike. It also mentioned that the Jagrati would be open to the public throughout the day. When the rickshaw pulled up in front of Nilama's house, Pratima ran outside to see what was going on. When she read the leaflet, she asked her brother-in-law who was getting married and was stunned to find out that she was the bride. She could not quite believe it. But when her father came home in the afternoon, fresh from seeing to the marriage preparations, she dried her tears and accepted her fate, resigned to the hope that her father would not have done such a thing if it were not in her best interests. Baba oversaw the preparations in the Jagrati. He bought a new sari for Pratima and a new kurta for Pranay to wear during the ceremony and the reception. He also sent telegrams to invite the Margis living outside Jamalpur. Baba even let it be known that he would conduct the wedding. When the hour drew near, however, so many non-Margis crowded into the ashram to attend that Baba deputed Arun Masumdar and Sukumar to conduct the ceremony on his behalf. He explained to them that if he presided over the wedding, the public would come to know that Pravat Sarkar was the Guru. Instead, he remained in his room. Pratima arrived at the Jagrati shortly after 7, when she was welcomed with garlands and the trumpeting of conch shells. Uma Sarkar took her hands and led her to the tiger skin, on which she was to sit during the ceremony, and then sat down beside her as the wife of the Guru. Pratima still did not know whom she was going to marry. The groom had to be pointed out to her. She was surprised to see the same man who had kept his eyes closed the previous evening when she had sung and had afterward avoided her. As the final preparations were being made, Pranay looked at his watch and felt a slight glimmer of hope when he saw the minute hand reach 7:30, the precise time that he had agreed to the wedding with Pratima's father and put his one condition. He went to Baba's room and told him that the 24 hours were up. Now he would not marry. Baba roared at him to go back and sit for his wedding, and his last glimmer of hope went out. After the ceremony, the new couple went to Baba's room, placed garlands around his neck, and received his blessing. A reception followed, after which it was announced that the couple would conduct a Hindu ceremony in the traditional Bihari fashion in the house of Pratima's sister, followed by a British-style ceremony. All were invited, and the festivities lasted well into the next day. That evening, Pranay and Pratima went alone with Baba on fieldwalk. When they reached the tiger's grave, Pranay's frustration spilled over. He fought with both Baba and his new bride. Baba defended Pratima, who said that she felt Baba's power for the first time that night, enveloping her on all sides. Pranay stormed off, leaving her there with Baba. He did not return to his house in Rampur colony that night. The night of Phul Saja, when the groom traditionally decorates the bridal bed with flowers to welcome his new bride. Instead, he took the flowers to the empty Jagrati and tearfully adorned Baba's cot. It was just before dawn when he finally arrived home. Pratima was asleep. A few minutes later, there came a knock at the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to see Baba standing there. Blurry-eyed and still tearful, he touched Baba's feet and invited him in. Pranay, Baba said. I have come to initiate Pratima. Tell her to take a bath, put on clean clothes, and get ready. When the initiation was over, Pratima requested Baba to give her a new name. Why? He asked. All my life, people have been teasing me about my name, asking me what I am the image of. But Pratima is such a beautiful name. Baba began reciting a poem of Dujendra Lal, a mystic poet of Bengal. How can I worship you with an image? Your image is this vast universe. How can I build a temple for you? The boundless sky is your temple. Your image is the planets, the stars and the sun, the ocean, the springs, the mountains and forests. Then he smiled and changed her name to Pramila. A few days later, Baba returned to their house to give Pramila her second lesson, the Guru Mantra. When he asked her how she was finding her meditation, she said, Baba, I don't understand this meditation. I am not used to sitting like this. Moreover, there is nothing in front of me, no idol or image. I don't know whom to worship. I am trying, but it is difficult. And I have to tell you, if I don't like it, then I am going to give it up. And I will tell everyone it's a fraud. Baba smiled. You don't see anything when you meditate? No. I will show you then. Baba reached out and touched her forehead. Pramila suddenly felt her body growing light. She lost consciousness and entered into a state of trance. Nearly 2 hours passed before she became aware again of who and where she was. She was still sitting in meditation posture, her mind inundated by bliss. Baba was still sitting in front of her. How do you feel now, Pramila? She smiled sheepishly. Very nice, Baba. I think I will continue to do this sadhana. Over the next few months, Baba gave her the rest of her lessons personally, and the following year, he began teaching her the lessons of Kapalik sadhana. On the 1st of May, a Monday morning, 2 weeks after Pranay's marriage, Baba came to the Jagrati, accompanied by a couple of local acharyas. Nityananda met him near the gate. Baba's first words to him were, Are you ready now? Unable to understand what Baba was referring to, he kept silent. When Baba didn't say anything, he told him that he couldn't understand his question. If I decide to make you Avaduta right now, are you ready? Nityananda was taken by surprise. He had thought that he would have to follow the rules for 1 year first, as Baba had indicated. Barely 5 months had passed. Well, what do you think, Baba asked. I am having some difficulty, Baba, with something. What is that? It is a private matter. Then let us go to my room. Once inside Baba's room, Nityananda explained that he was having difficulty with the rule that enjoined upon Avadutas to treat all women as mother. He would need more time before he could habituate himself to this way of thinking. Is this the only rule you have difficulty with? Yes, Baba. Then I will take that responsibility. Emboldened by Baba's promise, Nityananda agreed. Baba initiated him into the Avaduta order and gave him the monastic name Acharya Satyananda Avaduta. If unknowingly or unwittingly anyone calls you by your old name, Baba said, tell him that you are now Acharya Satyananda Avaduta. Baba explained to him that traditionally, the Guru hands a saffron dress to his disciple at the time of his initiation into the order of sannyasis. Then the disciple puts it on for the first time. It was not yet decided what dress he would wear. Baba asked him to design a suitable dress and have it ready for Baba's birthday on the 19th of that month, 10 days before the Ananda Purnima DMC in Munger. Over the next couple of weeks, the newly christened Satyananda experimented with different modes of sannyasi dress: pants, dhoti, lungi, kurta, etc. Finally, he decided on the dress that would be used by Anandamarga monks from then on: saffron lungi, tunic, turban, and waistband. On the 19th morning, while a crowd of devotees gathered outside Baba's room, he showed the dress to Baba, along with a necklace of Rudraksha beads and vermilion paste to apply to his forehead. Baba approved the dress, but told him that it would be better not to wear the Rudraksha beads or the vermilion mark, because it might create fear or mistrust among members of the general public. Baba handed the dress to his disciple, who put it on and stood in front of him as his first sannyasi. Satyananda was overcome by emotion. For a few minutes, he felt a sense of self-existence merging into that of his guru. When his mind returned to normal, he came out of the room and presented himself to the Margis. Some of them wept openly. Others touched his feet and then their foreheads, symbolically accepting the dust of his feet. Most embraced him. 10 days later, at the DMC, Satyananda sat in full dress by the side of Baba's cot in front of several thousand Margis, while the devotees danced and sang and forgot themselves. Despite the scorching summer heat, many went into samadhi and fell to the ground in trance. One devotee recalled that there was not a single person present who was not dancing in devotion, man or woman. After the DMC, Baba put Satyananda in charge of training the future Avadutas. He rented a small apartment not far from the Jagrati to make it easier for the trainees to follow the rules of conduct. A number of the whole-time workers put in requests to be accepted for training. Many of them started facing pressure from their families to return home. Their relatives became afraid that they might lose them to the new sannyasi order. Some parents traveled to where their sons were, working to try to bring them back. Others went directly to Satyananda to beg him not to take them. In response, Satyananda issued a circular saying that no one under 21 could become a sannyasi without the permission of his parents. This helped to calm the preoccupations of some of the families. But still the candidates appeared. Those who were accepted remained in Jamalpur to take training and begin their trial period. On January 1, 1963, Baba initiated 3 more trainees into the Avaduta order. 2 of them were young whole-timers, Ramesh Kumar and Asim Kumar. The other was a married disciple, Ramaswarath, whose wife, an ardent devotee, had been happy to give him permission. While Ramaswarath was in Baba's room being initiated, Baba asked him what his mother tongue was. Hindi, Baba, he said, the normal reply for any Bihari. Hindi is your mother tongue? Baba's mood became grave. Suppose you meet your mother. What language will you speak? Maithili. You and your mother speak in Maithili. You speak with the villagers in Maithili. So how can you say that Hindi is your mother tongue? You use Hindi to talk with outsiders. There is no region anywhere in India where the mother language is Hindi. Baba enumerated the mother tongue for every region in Bihar before continuing. Now tell me, is there any place where Hindi is the mother tongue? Ramaswarath kept silent. Baba went on to explain that the British had cultivated Hindi during the colonial period as a medium for instruction and administration. Rather than being an indigenous spoken language, it had evolved out of certain dialects prevalent in and around Delhi. Where do you want to be sent for Prachar? Baba asked. Do you mean foreign countries, Baba? Ramaswarath asked, aware of Baba's desire to see Anandamarga spread throughout the world. What do you mean by foreign? Tell me what the word foreign means. Ramaswarath kept silent. It means what is not your own. If you have a wound filled with pus, then the doctor calls the pus foreign matter, a substance that should not remain inside the body. Not a single person in this world is foreign. For an Avaduta, the entire creation is your own. There is no country that is not your country. Now tell me, which country is not your country? Again, Ramaswarath remained silent. You are also Kapalik, so you should remember your oath. If you say foreigner, then you will divide yourself. So from today onward, you will say overseas, those who live on the other side of the sea or outside India. They are not foreigners. They just live in a different place. Baba completed the initiation and gave him the monastic name, Acharya Shivananda Avaduta. Shivananda informed the Margis what Baba had told them, and the recently formed committee for propagating the mission outside India dropped the word foreign and replaced it with overseas. Before the organization could expand overseas, however, it would need trained, experienced representatives who would not have to leave a family behind. Those representatives were now underway. Thank you.